对，关于欲望和阶层的一个关系，我不知道，就是我有
Hi, I'm Peng Zuqiang. I'm a visual artist working with film, video, and installations.
Welcome to Frankfurt and to Double Feature. I'm super thrilled that you are here today, that we have the opportunity to talk about your work Sight Leak from 2022. I was thinking to initiate our conversation to ask you about your process of research that you were going through while preparing for filming, and also how this process has led you to invite collaborators to contribute with recorded lines.
Right, yeah. So the work started with me coming across this book by Roland Barthes called Travels in China, in English. And this was a book of diary that he kept when he visited in China in 1973 during the Cultural Revolution. So what was interesting for me was that most of the diary was these entries of boredom. You know, he found China a little bit disappointing to him. I think he had a different vision of what communism probably could look like. But then among those things, there were these lines and passages of observation and projection of desire onto Chinese young male bodies. For instance, he writes about how he saw how he felt the hands of a factory worker is really moist when they shake hands, or they notice the handsome face of a translator, or the young boys that he sees in the hotel lobby that would have their arms around each other's neck. And I thought these lines were at once intriguing but also disturbing. I mean, I think in one sense they embody this homoerotic foreign gaze that I considered. But on the other hand, also saw maybe there's some space in there that I can play with instead of simply, put a critique onto. So that was how this project kind of started when I first read the book. And then I was imagining a character that perhaps could be a local tourist, like someone perhaps from that area, but touring around the urban scape, instead of someone who comes from abroad and see China in general. I think with that in mind, it gave me a lot more liberty. And so in the end, I had this really rough kind of, almost like shot list, but not really, a combination of things that I kind of scripted in terms of what this character will do and visit. And then also locations that I thought I'll just go and bring the camera and bring perhaps the character there and we do something on the spot. One of the big questions was how to treat these passages of art, how many of those lines I actually want, I want in the film. So instead of giving space to that, I decided just to include one passage, and the rest of the voices were a combination of these dialogues between us talking about questions such as the relationship between class and desire, or the question of the gaze. I had this idea in mind, like, okay, because Barthes was writing about young Chinese male body, I want the voices in there to all be, young queer male bodies in there. What I took in the end was these, small fragments of, statements or even like the hesitations in between or the pauses. I realized I was interested in these things, kind of the space between the dialogues also, or the unresolved conclusions. So that ended up becoming part of the work.
就是我觉得我自己还蛮不愿意看别人，在这样观看的过程，自我感知的程度会特别的明显。对我今天才意识到，好像凝视更少是关于我在投射什么东西，而更多是关于他在我的眼神中能看到什么关于我的事情。
When I was reading Barthes, he was talking about the outside gaze and the inside gaze, but also the sideways gaze. It's the red thread through a lot of work and like also installations that you are doing. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about like what the gaze is to you, or like how you instrumentalize the sideways gaze that Barthes was talking about?
Right. Really good question. I feel that's the set of complicated question that image maker, all of us think about, right? So this Sight Leak was an example of that too, right? It started with, okay, how do we work with homoerotic foreign gaze? I don't think I have an answer in the end, but it's an attempt to do so, right? Perhaps one of the solutions in the work that I had in the end was to think about, by inviting other voices in, how to kind of decenter the original gaze that was there, and opening up spaces for other voices to come in that are not necessarily formulated into single arguments or a single vision, and that contradicts each other. So there's that, and the sideways gazing that Barthes brought up, which is at the very end of the book, which I thought is interesting because it's a reminder to the readers that he's aware of his own problematics, right? He's aware of he don't have a knowledge of what he observed and looked at and experienced. He's aware of his limitations. So I thought that was something interesting too, meaning that this is a figure that I'm dealing with that's not just oblivious about or unaware of his own positionality. Yeah. So I thought that layer was important for me as well, I guess.
I read this very nice line in the text of the book that you have just recently published, which says that nightclubs, for example, are not just places, but they are also constellations for and of relationships. And we are sitting at a bar or at a nightclub. And also your film starts with a dancing scene in a nightclub. And I thought maybe this would be also a good point for you to tell me a little bit more if you have a special interest in this sort of scene or ballrooms and stuff like that.
Right, yeah. Thank you for picking that line up, but I thought also that's a beautiful line by Shauna, who is the contributor of the publication.
Yeah.
And he has an interest in nightclubs, and he writes about the nightlife and nightclubs in Shanghai, which I recommend everyone to read. But in my case, in the work, as you were saying, I started in a club, which is a club in my hometown that's called Hip Hop. So, but then a lot of queer people start to go to the bar. So now it's almost a destination in my hometown for both locals and tourists to come in. When the music is on, those who are ready will get on the table, and everyone have their phone up, kind of filming them and chanting or singing together. And the dancers on there, not all of them need to be that good. There's ones who we know have danced for years, or know every single of these pop songs and know the choreography. But there's also ones I've seen who came with pajamas, came with plastic slippers, probably from their bedroom. But I mean, a deeper interest towards that is also this form of collective gathering, which I'm always interested in, because in a sense, how rare that can happen in the urban landscape in China, where people can self-organize and do something collectively. I feel the recent emergence of these kind of collective dancing, whether in a club setting like that or in public spaces, for instance, shopping mall or squares or parks. I was interested in those too, and bringing people together, bringing young people together in a public space with hundreds of them, doing things together always fascinate me. So I decided to include a few of those themes in the film.
So I also wanted to ask you about the materiality of your film, because it's a black and white film that has sidewise a very grainy feel to it, if you can even say that. And I was wondering what kind of technique or material did you use for making the film?
Right. Yeah, so the film was my first time using 16mm and filming through Bolex camera, and also the first time using black and white. I think, of course, there's this, because in my work there's this interest in bodies and hands, and through previous project I learned how silhouette film has such a magic quality when it comes to portraying those. So I thought I want to continue trying that. and perhaps extend from Super 8 to 16 in this instance. But there's also the aspect of just curiosity. You know, I've never used it, so I want to try it. And letting things driven by novelty too is a kind of spontaneity I'm interested in as well.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you for all the questions.